When you open a classic mystery, you expect a specific set of rules. A cynical detective, a city that feels completely isolated, and weather that constantly oppresses everyone on the street. Hosea Robertson executes these exact tropes with total precision in the opening lines of his story. We get sideways snow over Morehead Bay, thunder fading like a struck drum, and a lonely narrator seeking refuge in a quiet cafe. He populates this room with a specific mid-century gallery of ghosts to lock in the mood, noting Miles Davis' frozen mid-note on the wall. He follows that up with Billie Holiday, Dexter Gordon, and Etta James keeping time. The historical anchors are firmly in place. By laying down these gritty, familiar details, the text actively builds a false sense of security. You settle in, fully prepared for a standard mob run-in or a slow-burn murder mystery. Then, the cafe door opens. The person who walks in is Tanana. She's wearing fur-cuffed boots and a sky-blue hat, but it's her hair that fractures the monochrome aesthetic. It cascades down in bright winter pink and lily-light purple. The jarring visuals are immediately followed by jarring dialogue. She casually mentions her father, High Fae King Nahan, and the enforcement of royal decrees by the Amethyst Mistglen High Council. We are suddenly in a tonal vacuum. The gritty 1930s Earth aesthetic we were promised has crashed head-on into the vocabulary of a high fantasy tabletop campaign. The obvious question is how a writer manages a collision this violent without the entire story collapsing into absurdity. This Venn diagram illustrates how that balance is achieved. On one side, we have the dark elements of noir. On the other, the magic of high fantasy. They intersect in a liminal space. The author uses the cafe to build this neutral zone. Inside, the winter storm is reduced to a soft hush. The outside world is muted. Inside this bubble, time stops functioning normally. The menu prices belong to another century entirely. Coffee is 30 cents and donuts are a dime. These tiny, anachronistic details make the bounds of reality feel intentionally thin. The setting feels detached from any specific year or rigidly defined universe. The cafe acts as a carefully engineered pocket dimension. It provides a safe, insulated container where two completely incompatible genres can exist simultaneously. With the physical space secured, the story relies on dialogue mechanics to keep the fantasy elements grounded. Tanana brings up massive concepts: paladins, epic royal marriages, and high elf queens. But we process all of this information exclusively through the narrator's highly cynical filter. His physical reaction to a royal decree isn't shock or awe. He calmly packs his pipe with aged Scotch tobacco, strikes a match, and blows a ribbon of smoke at the ceiling. When faced with the threat of paladins drawing swords to force a marriage, he treats the scenario with dry sarcasm, replying, "That tracks." Filtering a high fantasy princess through the mundane apathy of a classic detective neutralizes the ridiculousness. The contrast is exactly what makes the interaction believable. There is one final structural ingredient that fully justifies this specific genre collision. Throughout their conversation, Tanana never uses the protagonist's actual name. She addresses him directly as novelist. She tells him she won't let him wander around in this world on his own. We are looking at a literal piece of metafiction. The power dynamics of the story shift entirely. We realize we are watching a creator who stepped inside his own fictional universe to sit and have a cup of tea with his muse. This metafictional layer provides the ultimate structural glue. The detective and the fantasy princess can share this space because they are bound together by the act of storytelling itself. When you zoom out and look at the combined effect, the text reveals itself as a highly specific microgenre, cozy fantasy noir. Starting the story with cold, isolating street tropes serves a distinct structural purpose. It creates an emotional baseline of loneliness. Because we begin in the freezing dark, the sudden introduction of vibrant colors, gentle laughter, and genuine affection feels completely earned. Hitting completely different emotional temperatures creates a stark contrast. That contrast leaves a deeper impact on the reader than a story that plays it safe within a single tone. On paper, the premise sounds absurd. You have the ghost of Louis Armstrong playing the trumpet in the corner, while Fae royalty discusses marriage arrangements. But this story proves that genres are not strict cages meant to hold writers captive. They are palettes of paint meant to be mixed. True creative imagination requires stepping outside those established boundaries and intentionally breaking expectations to build something entirely new.